another revision stream, and today, I'm feeling good, honestly. I'm ready to get into some revision, and what I want to do today is plan an essay question, because we have been given homework, which is to write the essay. What I was thinking is we could do some generic revision today, to help me prepare for the essay. Now, the essay itself, I will write down the question, because I have it here in this textbook, which we have been able to borrow. So the essay question is, write an essay on the importance of responses to changes in the internal and external environment of an organism. So, it is asking us for the importance of response to changes in the internal and external environment. So. Let's quickly break this down. The essay question really wants you to hammer in 4 themes. And in the mark scheme, it keeps reiterating the fact that it wants you to link it to the question. So, for this particular question, it's asking for changes in the internal and external environment. So we need to pick 2 areas we can talk about where the organism is responding internally, 2 where the organism is responding externally. Now, I've already decided on a couple. The first section I want to talk about is hemoglobin. The next area I want to talk about is blood glucose regulation. But now we need to think about external factors, because these are internal. Okay, let's quickly go through them. Hemoglobin is obviously responding to the partial oxygen pressure. Blood glucose is, of course, literally, it's in the name, blood glucose. And we'll go revise these in a minute. External factors. Now, I said one of them should be populations and ecosystems. Things like allopatric and sympatric speciation, which I think we could easily talk about how, reproductive isolation leads to the genetic drift ceasing, and therefore 2 different species occur to fit the niche, due to mutation. But honestly, I wouldn't know how else to word it. I would not really know what else to talk about there, apart from allopatric and sympatric. We need to talk about the importance of responses. Hemoglobin... Okay, well, let's plan it like this. Let's go think of a third topic quickly. Responding to external factors. We could do the reflex arc. That could just be one, because you could easily talk about that in relation to things like the Pacinian corpuscle. You could easily link that to the fact that it's 3 neurons, only 2 synapses. You could talk about the synapses and how the impulse is carried, how it's important for survival. I think that's probably going to be the third one then, reflex. Because that is a pretty weak area of mine, so I think it'll be good to revise. So, these are the topics that I'm going to write about in the essay. We're going to kind of make it into a table. So, firstly, hemoglobin, what is it a response to? Highlighting the first part of this question. Hemoglobin is a response to the partial oxygen pressure. It's also a response to the partial CO2 pressure, with things like the Bohr effect. Blood glucose regulation is, of course, a response to glucose, but both of these are a response to respiration, respiratory demands. And this idea that because they are both used in aerobic respiration, if there's not enough glucose, then respiration cannot occur. You cannot meet your respiratory demands, which we'll talk about in a sec. Reflex arc is a response to stimuli, external stimuli. It bypasses, obviously, the brain. It just simply occurs between a sensory, motor, and relay, sensory, motor. Populations and ecosystems is a response to a change in the external environment, causing an organism to, well, causing a new species, really. So we could easily link this to a new species, and it's important for survival and reproduction of fertile offspring. So we could link that to... So yeah, speciation is important because it increases the survivability of a species, allows them to reproduce, obviously, with viable, fertile offspring, making sure that, you know, the species can continue. Obviously, because of random mutations providing advantageous alleles, it provides an advantage to the survival. We could easily talk about that, I feel. Meanwhile, with a reflex arc, that is going to be important for survival. We could give an example of something like if you're touching a hot object, the reflex arc will take place, you'll flinch, you'll move your hand away, which will prevent damage to the body / cell death. We could talk about... I don't know what else you would really want to talk about there, to be honest. We should come back to that. Blood glucose and hemoglobin, we're obviously going to talk about respiratory demand. How if you're performing vigorous exercise, we have our dissociation curve. And the idea that if there's more CO2, the curve is going to shift to the right. And what that means in summary is that it's going to disassociate with oxygen more readily, allowing it to offload oxygen more readily, meaning that that oxygen demand is met when you're doing vigorous exercise. So, I think that is a decent plan, to be fair. Populations and ecosystems, we should revise all of these. I'm just going to take a screenshot of this. And we are going to revise, firstly, let's revise blood glucose. Because we've just done hemoglobin today, and I'm going to attempt to write this essay question, not tonight, but Wednesday. So, let's start off with blood glucose. So, blood glucose regulation. We can talk about, firstly, an increase and a decrease. The increase in blood glucose is detected by the beta cells, contrary to the alpha cells. I always remember it as alphas fall, betas rise, because it's just like a funny Instagram thing. So that is that. I'm just doing some generic revision, firstly. So beta cells, in order to respond to an increase, that is going to be insulin, compared to glucagon and adrenaline. Obviously, that is going to cause the levels to then decrease or rise. And that is that. So, let's quickly then go and break these down. Insulin has multiple purposes. The first one is that it is going to bind to the membrane. It's going to bind to the receptor on the membrane. It is going to add more glucose channels to the cell membrane, increasing its permeability to glucose, allowing cells to meet their respiratory demand because more glucose is going to move in via facilitated diffusion. Insulin is also going to obviously convert glucose into glycogen. Meanwhile, glucagon and adrenaline operate by the second messenger model. Second messenger model is very easy, I think. Let's just see if I remember. So let's say we have our cell surface membrane here, and we happen to have a receptor here. What's going to happen is adrenaline is going to bind to the receptor. This will cause a change in the structure of the transmembrane protein. A change in the structure of the transmembrane protein. This will then convert ATP into adenyl cyclase. Adenyl cyclase does something which oh no, I don't remember it. I don't remember what happens next. Adenyl cyclase activates ATP activates the change in this structure activates some enzyme which converts ATP to adenyl cyclase. Or is it adenyl cyclase that... Oh, bro, the second messenger model. I thought that would be easy to remember, but it's apparently not. Second messenger model, where are we looking here? Yeah, they convert ATP into... Oh, CAMP, okay. I forgot. So ATP is converted into CAMP. And then CAMP is converted into... CAMP then activates... No, what the fuck? No, I'm confused now. It's adenyl cyclase, CAMP, and then what? Adrenaline and glucagon bind to the receptors to activate adenyl cyclase. So adenyl cyclase. Adenyl cyclase is activated, but then converts ATP to CAMP. CAMP then just activates. Protein kinase, that's it. Which then converts glycogen to glucose. Okay. So, we should then talk about the importance. We should also obviously mention words like gluconeogenesis, which is where obviously non-carbs are converted to glucose. Glycogenesis and glyconeolysis, which is where glycogen is broken into glucose. glucose is converted into glycogen. So, overall, that is all the revision for blood glucose regulation. We talk about it because we need to talk about the importance of responses. The importance here is that when there is a change in the internal environment, i.e. blood glucose rising or falling, it is managed via these processes, which we will go into extensive detail about. The reason why it's managed is obviously there is a respiratory demand when things like this occur, where insulin causes more glucose channels, that is on purpose, right? There are more glucose channels to increase the permeability to glucose so that more glucose can enter the cells and be used via respiration because there is a higher respiratory demand. Honestly, it goes hand in hand with hemoglobin very, very well. So if you talk about hemoglobin, I would also talk about blood glucose regulation. The next part I want to look at is going to be the nerve response, because I don't recall much about this, and I don't know how I would talk about this very well in an exam. Okay, so if we're looking at the nerve impulse, we'll start with a GCSE level knowledge and build it up. We have our sensory relay, I don't remember this little acronym either. Sensory relay, I think spinal cortex, maybe, motor and an effector. All I know is it involves specifically 3 neurons, which is the equivalent to 2 synapses. Now, honestly, with this part of the essay, I would probably hammer in less knowledge, more linking into the importance. Because I could not yap for a whole page about the nerve reflex arc. I could not. I would have no idea what to do, like how to talk about that for a whole page. Obviously I picked this topic myself, but I don't know how I would stretch that process. I mean, you could talk about what it is, in terms of where the impulse travels, the action potential, which you should probably use action potential after, you should probably use action potential over impulse, definitely. But we can talk a lot about the importance of these factors. Number 1, it is important for survival. The fact that it's only 2 synapses, you can talk about that, allowing for a quick response or a reflex. You can talk about how you are literally born with said reflexes, meaning that literally from the moment you're born, you can respond to changes in the external environment, i.e. stimuli. Survival, obviously important for survival, to prevent any damage being done or injury, or things like burning. I guess you could maybe even link that to the thermoreceptors on the skin, possibly, because you could say how the thermoreceptors will respond. They act as they are connected to the sensory neuron, which is then connected to the relay, which is then connected to the motor. Possibly. I'm going to quickly look up a reflex arc again, because I have no idea, to be honest. I have no idea what else to yap about. Okay, so yeah, it says photoreceptors in the skin, sensory neuron, relay neuron in the spinal, motor neuron. They are rapid automatic. I guess you could also maybe talk just overall about the effect of the nervous system. Like you could talk about how compared to hormonal changes, if we were to draw a line graph quickly, that would be an example of a nerve impulse. This would be a hormonal change because a nerve impulse is very fast but short-lived, allowing for a quick, rapid, in this case, automatic response. Contrary, a hormonal response is slower, but it lasts longer as well. So I should probably draw that like this. Because, yeah, it's a lot more of a slower response, but it lasts longer. So we could talk about that and its importance for survival. Trying to think what else. You increase your chances of survival by responding to changes in the environment. There's a specific name for it, the autonomic nervous system, where it's unconscious decisions, sympathetic, and parasympathetic, but we don't really need to go into that. So that's the nerve impulse, but I don't know what, again, I would not know how else to yap about this, beyond saying, i.e. thermoreceptors on the skin detect a change in the, detect a stimuli, i.e. a fire, that is then passed through. I guess you could very quickly mention the whole idea of synapses, the synaptic junction. You could mention, possibly, I would actually need to ask Miss whether we would be able to do this. Would you be able to mention the idea of summation here? Temporal summation, where more action potentials are fired, and spatial summation. Would that link to the idea of nerve impulses and the idea of a rapid response? I don't know. Because yes, but spatial summation means that there are multiple neurotransmitter being sent at the same time because there's multiple synaptic junctions. Synaptic knobs, presynaptic knobs. So I would not know whether to talk about that, to be completely honest. I would not. But you could probably get away with talking a little bit about synapses, talking about the idea that it's one way, unidirectional, the synapses. Therefore, I don't know, because it's important to respond to us. Let me check the examiner's mark scheme. Let me see. Reflexes were discussed. Some students showed understanding of the free neurons and its importance in producing a rapid response without involvement. Many just wrote about fast responses and often included the brain. Receptors were also talked about. Okay, so realistically, we probably shouldn't yap too much about synapses in that case. We could probably just refer heavily to the importance, refer quickly to a general overview of the reflex arc. So remember, it starts off as a stimuli, as I've just said, detected by a sensory neuron. It is then transferred to the spinal cord, the action potential through the spinal cord via the relay neuron to the motor neuron. Then it's an effector. The motor neuron causes the effector, i.e. a muscle tissue, to move or change in a way that then moves it away from the danger, because it's a rapid response. If if you touch something hot, you're obviously going to move your hand away. In that same deal, so we can talk about it being useful for survival to prevent injury, the fact it's a quick reflex, you are born with an innate response to stimuli like this. There's a lot to talk about. And finally, let's talk about populations and ecosystems, because this is arguably my weakest area out of everything in biology. Luckily, next year for uni, I do not need to know anything about populations and ecosystems, thank the Lord, because I might actually cry if I had to learn more about it. Don't get me wrong, it is interesting, but oh my god, I couldn't help. Speciation is the development of a new species. Speciation is a new species developing from an existing. It occurs when they are either reproductively isolated, so they can no longer interbreed. This can happen when a physical barrier occurs, i.e. allopatric speciation, or reproductive isolation. What are the advantages? Reproductive isolation can occur due to seasonal changes, mechanical or behavioral, genetic drift, and evolutionary change. But what is the importance of that? It doesn't really say. But we could quickly talk about this. So let's look at allopatric first. We have, so both are forms of reproductive isolation, but one is physical isolation. So we have these green people over here. Let's say there's maybe one or two living over here. They've maybe travelled somewhere, and then boom, there's a fucking earthquake, which splits the land in half. Then let's say that on this side, it's a different environment, maybe it's warmer, something like that. Then these guys, as time goes on, are going to want to, due to random mutation, they are going to adapt in order to become better suited, which they would never do if there wasn't a barrier there, because then they would just rejoin with the population. So the idea is that when physical separation occurs, the new population, as time goes on, will become acclimatized to that brand new area due to random mutations, and there being a different set of challenges. So let me just see what it says here, because maybe I've misspoke. So yeah, physical barriers stop interbreeding. They adapt to their new environments, and therefore the allele and phenotype frequency change. So some keywords to talk about there is this idea that the genetic drift will cease between these populations. And it's the same with sympatric. Where this time there is no physical separation, but there is a reproductive separation. So for example, one of these guys, one of these green gremlins, let's say it has a different courtship behavior due to a random mutation. Maybe, I don't know, if it's a bird, it has a different mating call, slightly different pitch. But what that means is it is now reproductively isolated from everyone else, and it will only be able to breed with others who have this similar reproductive isolation. Therefore, as time goes on, the genetic drift between these two will cease. It will become its own independent species. So we've talked about responses to external environment there. The idea that physical separation and reproductive separation can occur. I would probably hammer home the idea of... Let me just have a look. Yeah, some of these included excellent accounts of the processes involved, resulting in changes of allele frequencies. So we should always mention that word, allele frequency. It changes the allele frequency, and that is the importance of it, because then it is better suited, better adapted, due to the mutations. So I would say my plan for this essay is literally going to be 1. Hemoglobin, 2. Blood glucose regulation, 3. Reflex arc, and 4. Populations and ecosystems. Because it's my weakest area, I will likely run out of time about halfway through talking about it. So hopefully I can still cram in the idea of changing allele frequencies. Hopefully I can cram in the idea of allopatric speciation, the idea that random mutations occur because of physical separation. But yeah, there you go. I am very happy with that. I'm very happy. I'm probably heading off now. But I'm very happy with this essay plan. I am not looking forward to doing it, but I think I feel a lot better about myself now that I know kind of what I'm doing. So let's hope that whenever I get around to writing this essay, hopefully I do okay. I think for a first time doing it, I'd happily take half marks, maybe 15 if I get lucky. But I think because I likely have picked some pretty weak areas, I don't know how well I'll do. But hey, we'll give it a go nonetheless. Hope obviously you guys take care. And yeah, I will see you guys whenever. Goodbye.